The Switch has been out for almost 4 months, and when everyone thought the 3DS would stop getting support, it's still getting support from Nintendo. So let's look at games from May to now and upcoming games to see how much Nintendo is supporting the 3DS and why it's probably hurting the Switch's sales. So Fire Emblem Echoes, released for the 3DS. Let's see what else. Ever Oasis, which isn't a Nintendo game. Same with RPG Maker, so that makes a lot of sense. Miitopia and Hey Pikmin. Those games they announced a while ago, so I mean it kind of makes sense. A Switch port would make more sense, especially for Pikmin, because the low resolution of a 3DS can make it difficult. And Nintendo even said that. They said that there couldn't be a main Pikmin game on the 3DS because of the low resolution. Miitopia, that was also announced a while ago, but still, a Switch version of it would probably sell a lot better since there's not that many Switch games now, so people are more likely to buy Switch games even if they probably wouldn't buy it if the Switch had a bigger library. Metroid Samus Returns. Now, this is a game that a lot of people who own a Nintendo Switch would want to play because chances are most people who have a Switch now are hardcore Nintendo fans and are fans of Metroid. So I'm not saying this doesn't have to be on the 3DS since it's obviously not a demanding game, but a Switch version really would not hurt, and that's a game that would work very well on the Switch. Okay, so now later this year, much later this year in October, Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga Bowser's Minions. This would be a game that could get a lot of people who haven't bought a Nintendo console since the Game Boy Advance to buy a Switch because this might be my favorite Game Boy Advance game. It was my first RPG that I ever played, and I would buy this in a second on the Switch. Like literally, I would just go to the store and buy it because that's a game I'm really looking forward to. Yokai Watch 2, I don't really care about. So that's really for the rest of the year with Nintendo, and that's quite a few games. Also, I forgot to mention Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So yeah, it's not like there's a few minor games like Miitopia just coming out. There's some pretty big games like Metroid. There's a Pikmin game, even though it's not main series. A Fire Emblem game, a remaster of Mario and Luigi, and of course the Pokemon games. So that's not as good a support as some previous years, but that's still a lot of support. Now, the Nintendo Switch obviously doesn't have a lot of games, and it makes sense since it's only been out for 4 months. But still, a lot of these games could probably be multiplats and be on the Switch and 3DS, like Metroid Samus Returns. If that was on the Switch, a lot more people might buy a Switch because I'm pretty sure everyone, or at least most people who at least wanted a 3DS already have a 3DS because it's been out for 6 years. It's been out for more than half a decade. Nintendo just needs to realize that the 3DS had a great run, but it's time to move on to the Switch. Because now when people, let's say people don't have the 3DS yet and they want to get one, and they'll look and say, okay, the new 2DS cost $150, the Switch costs $300, and the 3DS has all these upcoming new games, so I'm going to get a 3DS because it's half the price and it's still getting games. That's probably how a lot of casual people who are not big Nintendo fans will think about it. They'll probably think that the 3DS will still get a lot of support and buy the 3DS instead. If Nintendo was like, okay, we're going to stop supporting the 3DS, if the third party developers want to support the 3DS, they can do that. Then a lot of people would probably say, okay, there's not that many upcoming games, I'll just buy a Nintendo Switch for the extra $150. And a lot of these games are probably not going to take a lot of time to develop. Like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, that probably took like a little more than a year to develop. I could be wrong. It might have took longer to develop, but it's just a remaster, and it's not a bad thing since the original one came out like 14 years ago. Um, so if Nintendo had this game on the Switch, as I said before, a lot of people would want to buy a Switch to play some of these RPGs like Mario and Rabbids, which looks interesting, but it's a very different game. Mario and Luigi, I would say, is a more combat focused game, um, and it has some adventure elements, and it has a lot of humor in it, and I'm sure Mario and Rabbids will have that, but it's a very different type of game. Like the combat is more like XCOM style. It's not more of a traditional Mario RPG. And Paper Mario. If Nintendo announced another Paper Mario for the 3DS, which I doubt they'll ever do, that would be really bad for the Switch because then people would probably say, okay, Nintendo isn't supporting the Switch, so why should I get it? Because people, not everyone can just go out and buy a Switch. Some people might, but they might be skeptical. They might say, okay, I already have a PS4 and I want to get these games, and I'm interested in a Switch, but it doesn't have enough games. Because you buy a console for the games. You don't buy it for a few really great games, unless you just want to buy it for Breath of the Wild, which is understandable. So right now, the only big games coming out for the Switch that aren't already released, because Breath of the Wild has already come out, and so is ARMS, are Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and this is for this year. I'm not counting Pokken Tournament since that is just a Wii U remaster, or not even a remaster, just a deluxe version. Okay, so Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I can't really think of that many more major games coming out this year. I guess Fire Emblem Warriors, if you want to count that, but that's still on the 3DS. And also, there's a lot of other games, but a lot of them are also on other consoles. And also Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, I forgot that. So it's not looking that good for the for how many Switch games there'll be this year, but it's looking okay for the 3DS. If Nintendo wants to keep supporting the 3DS, then they should at least make some of these games multiplats. I'm not talking about like Yokai Watch, where a lot of people will probably still buy it on the 3DS. I'm talking about games like Metroid and Mario and Luigi. Those are major games that people would want to get. They're not minor games like just random indie games. No, a lot of people are going to get these games, and if it was on the Switch, then people would have more of a reason to buy the Switch. And I realize the Switch is selling out and you really can't get a Switch now, but during the holiday season, when there'll be more in stock, if it doesn't sell out, then Nintendo is going to have an issue, because that means all the people who wanted to get a Switch this entire year decided maybe they don't want to get a Switch, or maybe there's not enough reason to get a Switch for them because of how many games are still on the 3DS and the lack of games on the Nintendo Switch. And I know people are going to be commenting, if you've watched this video this far, I know people are going to be commenting saying, "Oh, Nintendo needs to support the 3DS for people who don't have the Switch." But what about people who don't have a Switch and don't have a 3DS but have a Wii U? I'm sure there are people like that. Should you say Nintendo should stop supporting the Switch just to make Wii U games, or Nintendo should still make Wii U games? Or what about the Wii? There's plenty of people who have a Wii and don't have another Nintendo console. Should Nintendo keep making games for the Wii even though it's a decade old? No. 3DS is almost, I think, almost 7 years old. Is it 6 or 7 years old? But still, that's a long time for a console. The DS came out in 2004. The 3DS came out in 2011, and towards the end of the DS, Nintendo stopped supporting the DS as much because they knew the 3DS was coming out. And that is 7 years, but you have to take into consideration that the DS sold twice as many units as the 3DS. It's the second best-selling console of all time. It got tons of third-party support, so that made more sense. The 3DS, while still selling very good, it doesn't have the audience that the DS does, and there's just so much competition now that there wasn't back then, because back then the only competition was the PSP, and now Nintendo's competing with itself. Do people buy a Nintendo Switch or 3DS? A lot of people are really confused about this because they don't know what to get. They don't know if they should get the 3DS because of its back catalog of games, or the Switch because some of its upcoming games, which there aren't that many right now. So yeah, I know this was a rant about why Nintendo should stop supporting the 3DS. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments. Thank you for watching. Bye.